All right, welcome back to another episode of EventHubs Talking Block. I am John Catalyst Green. With me, as always, is John Velociraptor Guerrero.
And this screen's getting a little crowded because we also have the disembodied voices and images of Justin Adaptive Trigger Gordon and Steven Dream King Chavez. How are you guys doing?
Doing all right.
At the same time, go.
Yeah, doing all right. Trying to get through the morning, feeling a little bit sick, but I'm okay. Gonna power through it, and we're gonna do this thing. So.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Although I'm not able to play the Street Fighter 6 beta right now, so not.
That's the thing that we're all kind of wrestling with, trying to figure out our identities without the Street Fighter 6 beta. Now that we've experienced it once, right? But today we are coming together to give our tier lists, and we'll have 4 of them. I guess 5 of them by the end of this, right? Because we're going to do each one of our own opinions, but then also kind of a conglomerate. Well, if we put these all together in one. And John's going to lead us through all this because this is going to be a crazy, chaotic sea of tier list madness. But I give it to you, Captain.
Yeah, so at my top spot, I have Cammy. No! Just kidding.
Yeah.
Number 1, actually, I got Ryu. John, where did you have Ryu at?
So I put Ryu actually at number 1 also.
Oh, okay. And how about you, Steven?
I actually have Ryu at number 3.
Interessante.
All right. Mm-hmm. And then Justin, who actually mained Ryu in the beta, where do you have him at?
I also have Ryu on the number 1 spot. I thought he was the best character in the beta.
So talk about playing him. What was your experience like?
Well, I mean, he just feels straight up better from how he was in Street Fighter 5, which, that's obviously not saying too much. But I felt like his basic game plan of, just chuck fireballs and, his anti-airs, extremely consistent. I mean, it felt like I was able to anti-air everything just whenever I needed to. And it felt like he was built specifically around the drive, all the drive mechanics.
Oh, really?
He's built
That's
for
interesting.
Better than anyone else.
Almost. Can you wax a little bit on what that means? Because I would see Ryu, and I do see Ryu, and one of the reasons why he's number 1 for me is because people have been playing this character for 30 years now, and yes, it's different in each game, but you have a very understandable foundations to go off of when you're playing him. So especially if it's just a 3-day window beta test, you're going to have a little more intuition with Ryu, and people are going to make things come together. He's also supposed to be, and usually is, the character that is Street Fighter 101. So if he is gelling with this particular Street Fighter 6's mechanic, and he's lending himself as a character to the drive system, I think that's just more of the same with Ryu, but it's good to hear because that's what you want out of this character. But Justin, can you tell us what that meant? How did he lend himself to the drive system?
Like I said, I feel like he almost does it almost better than everyone else. You know how with the drive rush mechanic specifically, you can only cancel normals with the drive rush, and that costs 3 burrs. But with Ryu, there are certain situations where he can hit with the donkey kick or the new Hashogeki special, and essentially wait for the recovery to end, and then do the drive rush, and you're effectively picking up a combo from a special, which is not something other characters can typically do. But he's not even technically canceling anything, so instead of it costing 3 burrs, he's only canceling 1 burr. And because of this, his damage goes upwards of 60% if you're able to do the combos.
And I figure his combos are pretty straightforward.
Yes. Really the new thing with him is he has the new Denjin Charge, which can, it charges up the next uses of his projectile or his Hashogeki or one of his 2 supers. But if you use it with his Hashogeki, it's a free combo starter, a free combo extender.
Yeah, for Ryu, I agree that it's interesting with him because with a lot of the combos that we were seeing from the beta, it felt like Ryu could really take advantage of one of the techniques that we talked about before, which was the raw drive rushes during juggles, and using the EX donkey kick or the Hashogeki, he can get raw drive rush, crouching fierce, and then kind of continue from there, which is what helps him kind of tack on the damage. And we saw quite a few of the most damaging combos from the beta coming from Ryu, where he was doing 65% with all resources kind of thing. But I do agree there with Justin that some of his special moves really lend themselves to these big juggles with the drive rush stuff that really help him just kind of output the damage.
Yeah, in the stats we did, Ryu was a top character out of the best 100 characters in the closed beta. He had the most numbers of entrants there. And Ryu is traditionally a beast in the vanilla versions of games, and look no further than Street Fighter 4, Street Fighter 5, Street Fighter Cross Tekken, and he also won his fair share of tournaments in the Street Fighter 2 series. And while he was not the best character in Street Fighter 3, he had his moments in New Generation. This guy is typically pretty darn strong in these versions of games, and he felt the same way to me this time around. It's like, man, like if you can name a vanilla version of a game where Ryu is not a pretty decent character, like, you know, name it, but it pretty much doesn't usually happen. And if he's not basically the number one character right now, I'd be a little surprised.
Yeah. What doesn't he have in this? Or where is his glaring weakness or shortcoming? Nothing comes to mind. And yes, it's early, but he's got footsies. He's got pressure. He's got damage. He's got, as Justin said, he can use the drive system effectively, which is a huge deal in this. That determines so much of this game. It feels like Ryu is the all-around sort of jack of all trades. Not to say that he has a command grab and, you know, a dive kick, but he gets all of the bases covered very effectively. And it feels more right now to me like they're just making sure that they had a Ryu that can throw fireballs, that can uppercut, that can do combos, that, again, covers all those bases, and maybe we'll worry about tweaking him or toning him down later if needs be, but they've got a lot of other stuff to get to, so they probably made him that character, and that's what we're seeing right now in the beta.
Sure.
So at number 2, I've got Ken. And Steven, where did you have Ken at?
I actually have Ken at number 2 as well.
Oh, okay. And John?
I've got Ken at number 6.
Ooh,
No, I'm sorry.
Quite a
I'm
ways
sorry.
down
1,
there.
2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 6.
All right. How about you, Justin?
I have Ken at number 5.
All right. So I had Ken pretty high up there as Steven as well. Ken is currently a master of combos in Street Fighter 6, and it felt like everything he did would set you up for a juggle or lead into more combo possibilities. And I actually think there's a solid case to be made that he might be the overall best character in the closed beta, even over Ryu. If you look at the top 20 players online, Ken was head and shoulders above the field with 7 people playing him in there, and then Ryu was next with 4. So all of Ken's options seem really solid to me, and he just does a ton of damage when he connected with his attacks. And I actually think he's the most likely candidate for nerfs already because he felt really too good at a base level compared to the other characters in terms of like how easy he was to play for how strong he was. But Steven, how did you feel about him?
Yeah, actually, those are pretty much the exact notes that I had here. His rushdown's really good in this game. He's got combos for days. He was the most used in the top 20 and the top 50 for the highest ranked players. I feel right now, I think that at least for this tier list, like the placings are pretty down to the wire, so it could kind of go any way. So like especially my top 3, it's like it's really close. So that's why I had Ryu beneath Ken. But I think Ken is really good in this game already, and yeah, he was being used a ton. I came across him so many times when I was playing the beta.
Yeah, I mean, Ken, you know, he's basically, you know, what you expect from Ken. He has amazing corner carry. I saw, and I believe one of his new specials, it sets up frame advance, which is actually very important for. I think it's going to be very important for Street Fighter 6, assuming nothing changes from the beta, because a lot of the normals actually weren't like frame advantage. They're changing up things a little bit, so having, you know, something that gives, you know, essentially free pressure from a mid range, that's pretty good. But overall, I do think that Ryu does have the edge over him just because, you know, Ryu's better at zoning. But aside from that, I did think Ken was, you know, despite placing him at 5th, I did think he was a really good character overall.
Yeah, I have no issues with Ken being higher up. In fact, this is, like Steven was saying, all of these characters are very close. They're elbow to elbow. So if you're looking at my tier list here, I have it spread out across only 2 levels vertically of, you know, there's S tier and A tier, and I'm not even married to the division there. These characters could all be on a single line as far as my, you know, impressions thus far. But Ken, very similar to Ryu, just in his design, right? He's got the DPs, he's got the fireballs and such, but then he tends to be more rushdown. Ryu's more all around. And in a first look, rushdown characters are probably going to be better because people don't know how to deal with their rushdown yet. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to Kimberly. But so I don't have an issue with this. The only thing is I didn't play a lot of Kens. I ran into Maximilian, who might be the best, well, the most experienced player on the planet as far as, like, you know, when the beta popped up, maybe save for Capcom employees, but I know he's had a lot of time with the game. And I know what you guys are saying with all of the combos and such. I just didn't see much of Ken outside of that. And with my experience with the other characters, I was just going to put them higher because I could go to better examples for how strong they were. But yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with Ken. I don't think he has a ton of shortcomings. I just haven't have as much experience with him. So I put him down farther in the list. But again, everybody's up, hugging each other. So yeah.
So at number 3, I've got Jamie. Steven, where did you have him at?
I have Jamie at number 4, actually.
Okay, so pretty close. How about you, Justin?
I also have Jamie at number 4.
Okay. And then, John, you main this character in the beta. What do you think of him?
I've been all over the place with this character, but he's great. He's fun. He's got some clear advantages especially once he's started drinking and leveling up, and the fact that he can combo after his level 3 super if it's not a critical art, that seems to be a really big deal. And when it is a critical art, it does so much damage. So he's got a lot of positives there. I think what it's going to really come down to is how well he fares in neutral, which seems pretty good right now. But I have him at 5th overall. And the reason is because I think he's going to take a little more time to really come together, and we'll see his true potential. Like, we see some of it right now, but I see other characters that are able to play the neutral a little better than Jamie for various reasons at this point. And given that it's a beta, given that we're just at this early level of understanding, I felt like he required a little bit more navigation and a little bit more attention, a little bit more threading of the needle in neutral than other characters necessarily did. So that's why I put him a little bit lower. His potential is definitely there, but it's a little harder to manifest than some of the other characters, and that's why I have him at 5th.
Yeah, I felt his core stuff is pretty daunting to deal with in terms of being on the other end of it with the Jamie player. And then a number of strong players were using him in the beta, like Punk, JB, Brian F, and maybe most importantly out of all those players is Kazunoko. Kazunoko practically never plays anyone unless they're godlike, and if Jamie stays intact with how he is now, I think we're going to see him rise up the tier charts upon release. His drink level up system is really good. It felt like he had a bunch of ways to not only make it safe, but like make it plus, where if like, oh, I'm going to challenge him because he drank, it's like, oh no, he's actually plus there and he is going to counter hit you and kill you. And then I think I saw his level 3 about 7 billion times.
The longest level 3 in the game, right?
Yeah.
They need to cut the animation of that, but also the fact he can combo after it, all this other kind of stuff. The one thing I can see potentially holding Jamie back is he does have a higher execution ceiling, and it could make some room for like some user error in the future. But he felt really good all around. But Steven, how do you feel?
Yeah, so I think I got the most experience fighting against Jamie since I played against John here at Velociraptor. Yeah, and what I felt with that character was like, he seems very technical, but it feels like his baseline stuff, like the barrier of entry to get in and start doing stuff, like it's not that steep, and he can be really effective with that as well. But I think the biggest thing that I saw from him was like, I saw a lot of different high-level players doing different things with Jamie, and it didn't feel like anybody had it all together, right? And naturally, because it's a 3-day beta, right? But you could see there was so much room for optimization in different areas where I'm like, I've seen other players do combos here or do setups here that, different players aren't doing. So I think once that all comes together, like, he's going to be really good. And it's like, I think he has some really strong tools to work with so far.
I gotta really quick point out too that Street Fighter 6 in a nutshell, as far as my experience thus far, is what you want, is intuitive. Like, you can get in and do the basic level stuff so that the character is fun, or the experience is fun and intriguing right off the bat, but there's still plenty more for you to delve into and spend time in training and figure out the optimization for, and that's exciting in and of itself, and it takes you to new heights. So fun immediately, and then fun long term, and that I do agree that that's what Jamie is right now. But it's also intimidating that, like, you gotta learn Jamie at no drinks, you got to learn Jamie at 1 drink, 2 drink, 3 drink, 4, and then all of the other stuff about him, the fact that you can combo after level 3s and the frame data and all that stuff. And so there's just no way people have that down either on offense or defending against him, so it's hard to place him. But because of that, then you also have a character like, we talked about Ryu, who's a lot more straightforward. In a beta tier list, that character is going to crush this character almost every time.
Justin, how do you feel about Jamie?
Just because of how his drink system works, he has kind of a snowball effect where if you start winning with him, he's just going to win more as time goes on because he's going to up his drink level, and Overall, I thought his footage, his ability to play mid space was really good. Although it sounds like John's opinion might differ a little bit, but his mix-ups were really strong, and I believe once his drink level gets to a certain point, he gets a command grab where he essentially combos out of it. So he has
level 3.
Level 3, I guess. And he has a level 3 that he can combo off of that too. So his damage is pretty consistent from what I saw, and his ability to play mid range really good. So he just felt like an overall solid character to me. But I did get the sense that a lot of people they weren't familiar enough with him throughout the beta. He did occur to me as a character that's a little bit more difficult to play than your typical Street Fighter like Ryu. So
Just needs some more time for the pieces to come together.
Yeah. All right, so moving on now. At number 4, I've got Kimberly. And John, where did you have Kimberly at?
Number 4, we agree. We're the same.
We agree. All right, how about you, Justin?
Well, I actually really hated fighting Kimberly, but I eventually settled on putting her in 6th place.
Oh, okay. So a little ways down there. And then, Steven, this was your main throughout the beta. Where did you have her at, and what are your thoughts?
I have her at number 5, actually. And if we're doing, like, tier categories, I'd say she's in B tier right behind Jamie. I think she's actually really strong. She has a lot of tools for corner carry and great combos. One thing that I don't think people talked about much is the fact that she can go under projectiles with her slide or run slide. Which is a pretty important tool here in Street Fighter 6, it feels like, considering that there didn't feel like there were too many options, at least like special moves that could do that. And with fireballs being what they are in this game, like that seems pretty damn good to me. It felt good as well when using it. Her movement options are pretty difficult to pin down. And I think that there was a little bit of a, because of her options and her mobility and stuff, she's one of those characters that I feel has great success early on because people just don't know where the hell she's coming from. But I even saw this against, Velociraptor as we played longer. He started kind of figuring out some of that stuff, and it became like, okay, now we need to adjust around that, or it's just getting completely shut down. But I think she was really good in this game. I think forward heavy kick was probably the biggest issue people had because that's her big lunging, like jumping kick attack where she bounces off of you. And that basically has, I believe, 4 follow-ups where it's like you can jump straight up off of, like when you bounce off, you can jump back or jump over them, behind them, or not jump at all. And so the mix-up of like, okay, I'm just gonna, it was a little bit of a scrub killer here early on where it's like, okay, do forward heavy kick, they block, and then you jump behind them, you get a cross-up, and it's like nobody's ready for it until they learn it, and then they're ready for it, right? And then
she has it. Doesn't she have an air command grab off of that where if you just block, she can come in and grab you?
No, so that is that's a special move. That's one of her run follow-ups where she runs and she like kicks off you and she flies back, and then you can come in with the command grab if you block it. So that's a different.
You said I started learning these things, but I was just doing things every time. This stupid character. I'm taking my turn now, guys. This stupid character was not stupid necessarily. It's early, but she had so many options, and yes, she has that run. She can jump. She can cut her jump short and come straight down. She can go past you. She can use the weird EX thing. She can, like all of these different options and situations. And a lot of the times what I found is that my answer was going to be a DP, and sometimes I could get like a cross cut, so it wouldn't matter if she crossed up or not. But a lot of times, if I was wrong there, if I was right, I was DPing her once. If I was wrong, I was eating a full you whiffed your DP combo, and that sucked. Now, it is early, and of course the shenanigans you're gonna get away with stuff. I was getting away with stuff with Jamie with just like continuing to do my rekkas on block because and people would stop blocking too early because they thought I was gonna stop. So a lot of that stuff you're getting away with, and my initial feeling was like maybe Kimberly's number 1, but I have to appreciate the fact that people are going to figure these out, and usually characters with that kind of BS, for maybe lack of a nicer term, are you don't make those the strongest characters in the game because then you're just playing weird mix-up goofiness. And so I don't think she's as good as she felt when I was playing her, but she's still pretty good.
She's pretty damn
Yeah,
good.
I love if you can look at Velociraptor's responses as Dream King is talking, and you see him progressively getting more and more salty. That is exactly what you should expect from Kimberly, because she's going to be the character that creates the most frustration right now among the player base, because she's fairly capable of robbery, and also she finished in third in the top 100 for the character listings that we put up on the website. For a newcomer that's right behind Ryu and Ken, that's a really big deal.
Yeah, and she can start offense. That's a big thing, especially early, is if you can start offense, even if it's unsafe, she's going to run up and slide on you. She's going to run up and overhead, whatever it is. But the fact that you can just overwhelm people early on before they know the game, that's a huge advantage.
Sure.
Tell the audience, Steven, how many sets that you and John played in the closed beta.
We played the first couple days. I think we played. What did we play? Maybe like 20.
I know we did a first to 30, and
did a
then we
first
also
to
had
30
like
to
2
close
other
it
sets
out.
at least.
Yeah, so our last set was first to 30, and I think the first couple sets we did were a little bit back and forth. And then the last set, that first to 30, I think it ended up being like 30 to 27 in my favor or something. So it got pretty damn close after
He knows
a while.
exactly. He's like, I got 426 rounds.
He had to drop it in there too. He's like, yeah, I beat Velociraptor.
I'm
And
only
then
going to post up footage of my wins against him, though, because I only
Hey,
recorded
I mean,
those.
I
like-
just wanted to
he
give
was
that
crying in
score
his coffee
because
afterwards.
Yeah, I wanted to give that score because it paints the picture that was actually a damn close set. And as our sets usually go, it was very much down to the wire. Last play, somebody squeaked by with it. And I wanted to illustrate that because, again, if it was like, 1 to 30 or something like that, then sure. But what I'm saying is, as the sets went on, you definitely, John, you started to adapt to things, and that early stuff didn't work anymore. And it's like, well, okay, like let's do the dance and try to adjust around this and start creating the mind games of this stuff of like, the counters, I know the counters, let me try to go around it and see if this works type of thing. So that's the reason I gave the score, not to brag, but more of like, it was actually a damn close set.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time I fought against Kimberly, I actually had a lot of difficulty fighting her because I don't understand the character, but in a way that kind of makes me think that the character might be somewhat gimmicky. Maybe it's the type of character that, we had to learn how to fight against before we really understand, where she is. So that's why I'm placing her kind of low. I found that if players, at my level, when I was playing in the beta, a lot of people had the tendency to just do random runs from across the screen, and it was really easy to just scout that out and just drive impact them a lot of the time.
I'm glad it was easy for you.
No, I wasn't.
said
Steven
got
did
me all
that
day
to me,
long.
and I got hit every time. I was like, here comes a random run, and there's me getting hit.
I love that
good.
you're saying, here comes a random run. You still can't block in time.
Nope.
You're like, you can say it, but you can't block in time. That's just, that's Kimberly. But yeah. Go ahead, Justin.
I mean, it worked well for me, but maybe they were telegraphing to me. I did get, for the record, I did not get a chance to play Dream King during the beta, just because, we're on opposite sides of the country. Another thing I thought was kind of, I kind of noticed particularly with her level 3, one of the big things about it is, after using it, she gets a permanent attack and speed buff.
For the rest of the match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But from what I've noticed, almost every time that Kimberly used level 3, it was to end the whole match. So I actually found it was kind of rare for her to actually benefit from that. I don't know how much damage it does, but if it does less damage because of that, I know it has less reach than you might expect. I remember watching Dream King on stream miss with that once when I think we were both surprised during his stream.
The distance on that, the horizontal distance on that is really short, and it's like, I think I tried to use it to punish something, and it just completely, I was like, well, okay. But just to kind of add to that, I did feel like the that level 3 buff was pretty rare. As I got later into the beta, maybe the last day, I started trying to kind of be cognizant of that and make decisions where it's like, okay, maybe I can spend level 3 here in the second round so I could take advantage of the buff. But even then, it never, the buff didn't feel noticeable to me, at least not in actual matches and stuff. I did test some training mode things that you could see the difference in damage, but it was it didn't feel like a significant, okay, I'm gonna use level 3 so I could take advantage of this. It just felt kind of okay, oh yeah, it's there, cool, let's just keep playing the game the way we were doing it anyway.
Yeah, Kimberly to me felt like Guy, Street Fighter 4 Guy, but on steroids, and I couldn't believe it. Some of his pressure setups and tactics were all right there for Kimberly from the get-go, and it was like, man, this feels so much like the Street Fighter 4 Guy matchup with, like, you know, the elbows and the mix-ups and other stuff that he has, and it felt like a really simple transition and stuff from those characters. Steven, I know you played a decent amount of Guy in Street Fighter 4. Do you feel that as well?
Yeah, that's part of what made me actually want to play her, because I'm like, oh, okay, like a lot of this stuff is going to carry over. She's got a lot of his target combos, the basic bread and butter with like crouching medium punch to standing, target combo, medium punch, heavy punch. All that stuff worked very similarly, but she had some new added mix-ups and stuff, which was really cool. But I did find it interesting that I think the least utilized thing I saw with her that I felt myself was her spray can stuff, which I was like, people were definitely using it, but it felt very limited just in the span of the beta, because it was like, okay, you get the knockdown in the corner, throw it down, you get like the overhead mix-up. It was one specific mix-up everybody was doing, and then outside of that, there was like a mid-screen kinda setup, and it's like, all right, I feel like people were just kind of like, I could just use her other tools instead. Like, people were going for it. I was going for it too, but it just felt like it was super limited. Like, it wasn't really super effective. Obviously, with expiration and stuff, that'll change. But I was just like, oh, that's weird, because that's such a big part of her, you know, identity and stuff. And it was like, oh, this just felt like it was kind of an afterthought type of thing for me.
Gotcha. All right, so moving on. At number 5, I've got Guile. Justin, where did you have Guile at?
I have Guile at number 3.
All right. How about you, Steven?
I have Guile at number 1, actually.
Ooh, number 1 character. All right. And John, where did you have Guile at?
Number 2.
Okay, so pretty high in there. This is a character that I main throughout the beta for the most part. His anti-air crouching heavy punch is extremely good. It felt like it covered pretty much every option that someone could do in the air. Some of the dive kicks maybe, get a little bit of trouble, but the zoning game from him felt really good. And what I struggled with was piecing it all together consistently to keep people out, but it was clear to me that zoning is way better in Street Fighter 6 than it was in the previous game. This version of Guile reminds me of his Street Fighter 4 counterpart, where he's pretty darn good at controlling numerous spots on screen, and it doesn't seem that you want to be up in people's faces all that much like you were in Street Fighter 5. It's like, no, kind of hang back and do that. And I remember Street Fighter 4 Guile generally being not top tier in most of the versions of the game, but still being a real pain in the butt to deal with consistently because his core zoning and anti-air game was so strong. That feels like what Street Fighter 6 Guile is going to be like to me. But Steven, since you had him up so high, how do you feel about the character?
Yeah, I think that his zoning was really damn strong. The boom pressure that he can do and all that stuff was really good. His anti-air stuff. There were some interesting things I was seeing as well that people were sharing, where setting up some traps where you throw sonic boom and then they neutral jump it, and he does drive rush in and gets like that crouching heavy punch and a juggle combo, and it's like, man, you think you're safe neutral jumping sonic boom from almost full screen away, and he still gets in and gets you because you slipped up, right? But one of the big reasons why I put him at number 1 was actually, I believe it was I'm Still the Daddy, who was the number 1 ranked player on the leaderboard for the beta. He was Guile. He got like over 26k LP or something like that. Obviously, there's some, he could have played some, opponents that don't really know what they're doing yet, all that stuff. But he was the number 1 ranked as far as I could tell, and he was playing Guile the entire time. Some of the other, big players who put out tier lists also had him very high. I think Justin Wong had him as like classified as top tier and busted, but keep him the same. I don't think he was a huge problem. And even if I'm looking at kind of my tier list here with like the categories, I don't have him in S tier. I have him in A with Ken and Ryu. So he was number 1, but again, everybody, as John was saying earlier, everybody's elbow to elbow. But I think that kind of pushed me to be like, okay, like all of that stuff coupled with the potential to do combos, like he's got a lot of extended stuff with the sonic boom and his install super, and he's got a lot going for him, but his core is so strong as well, where it's like, damn, man, like he's just got everything, like, and again, not to the point where he's broken, but like that is a fleshed out character who I feel like, even with the launch game, like when it comes out, I don't think he'll be outside of like top 3 or top 5. I think he's going to be really good.
Ooh. How about you, John?
Yeah, so we were talking earlier about the likes of, say, Jamie, and how there's some obvious evidence stuff that you can do, and that's good, but there's going to be so much more that people figure out as they progress through the character. I think that's true for Guile as well, but a lot more of what Guile does is sort of front-loaded in terms of people have been playing this character for 30 years now. And yes, I'm sure he's got his combos, he's got some crazy setups, and people were, like you said, digging into those, but he can also throw freaking sonic booms and do flash kicks and crouching heavy punches and get by with doing that. And when you have a familiarity with a character like this in a 3-day window, for a beta test, it's hard to say that they're not going to do well. Even if it turns out that everybody has really good, maneuvers and tools to deal with Guile, which I don't think is necessarily the case here. I think he, as a zoning and kind of mid-range pokey character, is going to do really well here in Street Fighter 6. But it's his advantage of familiarity for this beta tier list that I have him at number 2, and there was consideration to put him at number 1, but I think Ryu has that a little bit even more than Guile, and so I gave it to him. But Guile might be even more simple than Ryu, but that's not to say that he's better, because maybe when you miss, and John, you were saying something along that's like, when you're on with your anti-airs and such, it's hard to contest him, but when you miss, it kind of sucks, and so. Yep. And that can really be something that, like, if you're not on with Guile, it's going to be a big deal. So a lot of it does depend on the player, but a lot of players have had a lot of time with him. So there you go.
Justin, what do you think, man?
It's Guile. So, it's about what you expect from, a character that's typically very strong in the Street Fighter series. He's a very strong zoner. His sonic booms still have very low recovery. And as Steven mentioned earlier, like, you can hardly even jump over his sonic booms at times because he can use the drive rush and essentially get a combo off you just trying to avoid his sonic booms. Mm-hmm. And he also has really strong anti-airs. He has his install super. Once he gets a life lead on you, it's really hard to just run down a Guile. And as you also mentioned, John, zoning in this game feels very strong just because. With the drive, you can go ahead and just spend a whole bunch of your drive meter, see that you're down to like 1 or 2 bar, and just zone the opponent out for a little bit and give yourself time to recover. And that has felt like a very strong strategy in Street Fighter 6, and it's something that Guile was very much able to take advantage of in a lot of the matches I saw.
Yeah, it's zoning in this game is back, and it's actually a wonderful thing to see. It's hey, that's Street Fighter. You can zone in Street Fighter because you have fireballs and normals and all this other kind of stuff. And Street Fighter 5 said, "F all that noise. You can't zone anymore." But moving on to another game,
well,
or another
Guile
character, I should
could,
say.
but everybody else couldn't. But yeah, go.
Number 6, I've got Juri. John, where do you have Juri at?
3.
How about you, Steven?
I actually have her at number 6 as well.
How about you, Justin?
I have her as second best.
Second best. So this is a really polarizing character, as you can see even with our breakdown. She was the most overrated character I personally saw. Perhaps I'm missing a lot of stuff she can do here, and let the other guys go here in just a second, but there wasn't a single person who used this character in the top 20 players, and then she didn't really make an impact in the stats until we posted, until you factor in the players after the top 50. That's actually where Juri kind of like has the biggest presence, is like, the latter side of the top 100. And she's also a very popular character, so the lack of showing here, much like Shania Twain, did not impress me much. So perhaps I'm missing a lot with Juri, like I said, and so I have her as the most overhyped character, but yeah. What's the rebuttal out there?
Yeah, I had a few matches with her and had a very hard time keeping up with her in the neutral. And if I'm thinking about a character like Jamie, who's really built around what I think is built around low forward into Rekkas, so you have a particular control of that horizontal space, she was not running circles around me, but like maybe a step below that, running kind of weird octagons around me. And that paired with the opinions of so many other players saying like her and saying that her footsies, like the reach on her pokes and the conversions there, and then it gets even worse once she starts installing her moves. And most characters have that kind of a thing, by the way, so it doesn't seem like that much of a nerf to have to install a move or to build something up before you can use it. But that all paired together, and my difficulty in fighting against her, that's how I got her up to third.
How about you, Justin? What do you think of the character? You had her pretty high up as well.
She's a very weird character. I feel like most players probably didn't like fully grasp like how you're supposed to play. She's very combo centric. I mean, she even had her level 2, I believe, is even an install super that gives her like Marvel versus Capcom combos. But one of the big things is like Ryu. I felt like she really benefits from the drive gauge mechanic, particularly like drive rushing. One strategy that seems like it might be really strong is her ability to throw like a low fireball after, she has to get the charge, the Fuhajin, whatever it's called. And then she can follow up with a drive rush quickly after because it has such short recovery. And she gets free pressure from doing that. And then combine that with, as John mentioned, her pokes were surprisingly potent. And she was able to deal with fireballs just with that, the Fuhajin charge. So it seems like she just has good tools for about everything. And from what we saw, I believe in the beta, all of the characters have the same amount of life. So I'm not entirely sure what her weakness is supposed to be now that she doesn't have low life. So those are my thoughts.
All right, Steven. We both had her low. Defend me. Defend my opinion, please.
Yeah. So actually, interestingly enough, Juri was the only other character in the beta that I was in training mode with, just because I wanted to kind of see what I could figure out with her feng shui engine and the drive rush stuff. So I got a little bit of chance to kind of figure out, I didn't play any matches with her, but I just kind of got an understanding for how her tools work and things like that. I actually think she might be the best version of Juri that we've seen so far. Just because of the way that she kind of does things now, like her Fuhajin thing. She doesn't need to use that to charge up her special moves. That actually just banks the ability to chain these special moves together. So she can do fireballs just straight away. She can do her hop kick thing straight away as well. So I thought she was actually the best version of her, but her usage and I didn't see her dominating anywhere. It felt like some of the top players were playing her. I think they were playing her and then they switched off of her. I don't know, she just felt like she was just a bit below the rest of the characters that we have above her right now. Not to say that she's bad, but it just felt like something there was she's solid. She's solid, but she's not amazing, at least as far as I saw. And that might be a result of people not fully understanding how to connect all the dots and stuff yet, right? Because she does have a lot of interesting things, but it just felt like she was just a step below the rest of the characters that we've talked about so far. And yeah, I mean, again, and as you were saying, John, her usage, she's such a popular character, and to see her not get that much out of usage in the top 100. Even if you look at Street Fighter V, Ryu sucked for most of that, and he was always number 1 or 2 in the popularity, right? People still used him even though he sucked, whereas here it felt like people were just I'm not gonna waste my time. I've got 3 days, I'm not putting my time into this right now. I'm gonna play something better that I can help me understand the game,
I would say to that, though, that Ryu is attractive as a character to newcomers for more than just what you were laying out there. It's yes, people like Juri, and she's one of the most popular characters. She's right up there with almost Chun-Li. But as far as a playable character, I think Ryu is still much more inviting as here's a vanilla bread and butter kind of basics that's not as intimidating, where Juri as a character with almost all just foot techniques, for example, and installs is much more intimidating in that particular way. So that's not to take that doesn't completely eliminate your points or anything like that, but I would add that on and say. And then the other thing I wanted to say to that is that Sonic Fox has one of the absolute best internal instinctual compasses for what's good in games early on, and I thought he was going to play Kimberly, which he did. He started with Kimberly and had all of that crazy offense, which we've seen Sonic Fox do really well with. Smacks of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite come back to mind, but switched over to Juri. Now, I didn't see Sonic Fox do particularly well in the beta. This is just going off of the fact that he's got some really good fighting game instincts. But I will say, went from Kimberly to Juri, so there's that.
Yeah, and I did see that as well, but like I was saying earlier, I just felt like even with that, Sonic Fox wasn't dominating there or anything like that. Like you said, I don't think they did particularly well in the beta or anything like that. Not that they did poorly, it's just I didn't see that a lot, and it felt like a lot of other top players were flocking more towards different characters like Jamie and Ryu and stuff like that.
Love those Juri foot techniques.
Yeah.
But anyway, speaking of another character that's known for her footsies or foot play, I've at number 7 got Chun-Li. John, where did you have Chun-Li at?
I also have her at number 7.
All right, Justin?
I also have her at number 7, second worst.
Steven?
We got the clean sweep. I got her number 7.
Hey.
Oh boy. So this is a character actually I did pick up at the very end of the beta. I decided to play Guile mainly because I'm like, I don't have enough time to learn the technical character. I'm not going to play this character a ton until I have a good chance to sit down and kind of unlock her. The Capcom said from the get-go, she's probably the most technical character in the game currently. And it really felt that way playing her, where with Guile, I'm like, oh, just hit crouching heavy punch pretty much anytime someone jumps and you're good to go. With Chun-Li, it's like, okay, I've got to get used to like 4 different anti-airs. I've got to do this stuff. She felt fairly intimidating, but then I started to actually get fairly good with her right at the very end of the beta, and it started to feel good because her instant air lightning legs are back, and those don't seem to be heavily advantaged on block or hit. They actually work very similarly to how they do in Street Fighter V, but that's a pretty nice move to have in this game to go around projectiles and to go around moves. Her fireball, an all-around game, they never stood out to me as heavily impactful, hence me listing her as second to last overall, but there's actually, I feel like, a ton of hidden potential here because it's like the way Street Fighter 6 plays, it's far more of a zoning and footsie game than Street Fighter 5 was, and so I'm constantly going back to like, oh, I gotta play this game like Street Fighter 5. That's how I'm programmed to play these fighting games now, for better or worse, probably for worse right now. But once I started getting the knack down of like, oh, I can poke with her standing heavy punch and her normals and all that kind of stuff works, and I can use it to apply pressure, and then her foot speed is incredibly fast, and then her throw range seems very good. I started to see these little things about the character, and I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, but those opinions definitely don't bring the character up further on the tier list. I think she's still fairly bad, at least for how we know the character right now. But I do see her being unlocked quite a bit when people have more time with the game and are able to train up with her.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen Chun-Li. We haven't seen any of these characters, if you're going to get technical about it, but especially we haven't seen Chun-Li because, like, again, going back to what I was saying about Guile, if he's fairly front-loaded and, like, you're going to get a lot of you're going to understand him and start to do a lot of his good stuff early on, Chun-Li seems, even though she's been around for just as long, that's a good point to bring up, you're right, guys, but she is locked behind this, like, new level of technicality, and she's never been an easy character to play. Right? There's always been this, like, you have to choose which anti-air for the situation, and most of us are like, I can barely DP consistently, guys. Come on, I don't have to do back medium kick plus DP plus whatever, That said, she might manifest, she might bloom into a beautiful butterfly that is really good, and I wouldn't be surprised to see someone like, a player like Infiltration bring her out a year after the game is launched and be like, oh, here's the potential, guys. But she just as well could be a big flop, and who knows at this point. So it's Chun-Li I really don't know enough about to make a hardcore decision on, but if we're talking about the 3-day beta window, it's like, yeah, she just didn't have time to fly.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly how I feel about her too. It's very much like we haven't seen her yet. I don't think she's necessarily bad. I just think in the bubble of a 3-day beta, I don't think people had enough time to really understand how to play her, and that speaks to how technical she is. And also comparing that to another technical character, Jamie, like the barrier of entry that I was talking about there for Jamie was much lower than it was for Chun-Li, which is why I kind of put them in where I put them. But I really do feel like Chun-Li is just kind of she's just so technical that people just didn't have the time to do it, but she seems like she has some pretty damn good tools. Honestly, it's just how to apply them and use them and stuff. It hasn't been figured out yet.
So Chun-Li for me was like the least, the character I ran into the least. So it's clear that she wasn't very popular in the beta, and we saw that reflected in the top 100 stats as well. As has already been pointed out, she seems like a fairly technical character, and her overall game plan, it's I think generally she wants to go for like individual pokes, but it felt like that didn't really work too well with drive impact. Maybe there's more counterplay I'm not really understanding for her, but a lot of times she would throw out a normal and then get drive impacted, and I think I saw that a lot with a few streamers. So it felt like she's not built around that mechanic quite as well as other characters. And also, like, you know, she has like stance change in this game but it's a very awkward input. It's like down, medium punch, if I'm not mistaken. And it seemed like it's very difficult to incorporate that into, you know, whatever you want to do with Chun-Li. So.
Yeah, I will say that, especially if fast walk speed is probably a really big deal in this game, because neutral's a big deal in this game and footsies are. And Chun has always been a character that can contend in the footsie matchup, right? 'Cause she usually has farther reaching pokes. And if I Street Fighter 6 theory fight right now, you go, well, a character that's quick on her feet, can hit you from far away, and then incorporate drive rush, that sounds really scary. So I would not be at all surprised for Chun-Li to get unlocked, so to speak, and become maybe the best in the game or really high up there. So I just want to throw that out there for the Chun-Li fans. It's not like your character's necessarily bad or anything like that. It's going to take a minute.
Yeah, she's behind a wall. And the input for the stance change is a reverse fireball. Her down input is actually her anti-air, which is really interesting. That Capcom put the anti-air up kicks with a down thing. But all this stuff takes a long time to get used to, and it's going to be interesting to see where the character goes. But perhaps the most interesting character on the list, at least in terms of where they were placed, at number 8, I've got Luke, and I believe
goodness
everyone has
We've all
Luke
got
at number
Luke
8.
at
Is
number
that correct?
8. Yep.
Yeah.
Number 8, yep.
Yeah.
Coming from Street Fighter V, where Luke is the very best character in that game, I figured he kind of pick up right where he left off, especially with statements that Capcom made that he's a very important character to the future of the Street Fighter franchise. I'm like, okay, well, he's going to be good. Perhaps Capcom's tired of this guy kicking everyone's butts and decided to nerf him pretty hard in Street Fighter 6, and that would actually match up with what they did to Alex in Street Fighter 3, where they're like, hey, Alex is a new co-protagonist with Ryu, he's going to be awesome. Oh yeah, he's generally balls and pretty much sucks. That was Luke. He actually felt incomplete to me, which is pretty crazy. And it's like, I maybe in the hands of a pro, he's incredible, but this character feels like a neutered version of Luke, and they gave most of his mojo back to Ryu.
Mm-hmm. I want to know the specifics, because when you say that he has shortcomings, because I didn't necessarily, I ran into Luke a handful of times, and some of the people that were playing him really knew. I think I ran into the same guy a couple of times, and he really knew what he was doing. He had full combos, like looked like he was in the training mode, and part of that is because they were similar to Street Fighter 5 with the charge up flash knuckle and things along those lines, and then you just tack on like a super or something like that in certain areas. But he also had drive rush cancels of setups on wake up for overheads or not, a lot of that stuff, and Luke feels like probably the most simple character of the entire beta, and because of his similarity to Street Fighter 5, like a direct translation, I think people figured the most out for Luke, and there were some pretty cool things there, but that potential realized so quickly compared to like what we just talked about with Chun-Li and like how high she could get or how high Jamie could get once people really start figuring out their stuff. It still felt like Luke's was pretty basic, and so it's like, yeah, he got out there and got pretty high pretty quickly, but I do think that he does feel somewhat limited in his potential. It's just very easy to get there quickly. But what were the things about him that you felt like weren't good, John?
Yeah, he felt like he was playing Street Fighter 5 and Street Fighter 6, which is not a good recipe for success, because you generally don't want to be up in someone's face and pressing away with your buttons, because you're negative on block in most scenarios, so you're pushing yourself back to the point where they can zone you out and get into a good spot. And as much as people talk about Luke's zoning being great for Street Fighter 5, it probably is, because Luke is great at everything. It's not great in Street Fighter 6. You know, his fireballs have got a lot of, you know, they're just not all that effective compared to someone like Guile chucking booms in your face. And then, you know, he gets in there with his normals and stuff, and he's got some combos and he hits you pretty hard, but how is he going to consistently open you up? All that kind of stuff. Like I said, he really feels like he's playing the past game in this new game, and that is a really bad idea.
Yeah, I only ran across him a few times. I really didn't feel like people were playing him that much, and it just kind of felt like the community just didn't want anything to do with him. Like maybe they tried him out and they're like, nope, he's just not good, we're gonna move on. And then it seemed like consistently the consensus was he's bottom tier. He's the worst in the game, in the beta at least. I don't know. I didn't see anything that was too like, you know, that was really good or really effective. It just kind of seemed like people tried him out, didn't really like him, and then moved on to other characters. And like he didn't bring anything to the table that I felt was really different or really powerful or anything like that. He kind of just tried to, as John was saying, play Street Fighter 5 and Street Fighter 6, and that is a big recipe for disaster in this game. Drive Impact says hello.
Yeah, I didn't run into too many Lukes, but the ones I ran into, like I felt like there was a good reason why he wasn't being played very often, and the ones that I was playing, it didn't really feel like Luke had a really good game plan going. Like it feels like when I was fighting every other character, I was like, okay, this character's good at this character's good at this. I'm not really sure what Luke's strengths are in this. Like he can kind of, pelt you with like his projectile, but it feels easier to inch forward. Like it feels like you have a harder time inching forward against, say Ryu or Guile's projectiles. They have a lot more pushback on block, but like with Luke, I mean, he didn't really threaten much in terms of like the mid space, and I don't know. It felt like combos were underdeveloped with him. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's weird. He's such a his whole situation is really kind of mind blowing, because you look at him on paper, you look at the tools that he has and the different things that he can do, and you go, man, that would make for a really good Street Fighter 6 character. Like those tools applied properly, he'd be really strong, right? And then you see him in action, and you're like, oh, like that stuff's just not. Maybe Capcom did just nerf him towards the end here before the beta, and just went, nope, he's running rampant in Street Fighter 5. We don't want people to say the same thing in Street Fighter 6, and maybe they just toned down a lot of his stuff, right? But it's weird. Like you think like this character's gonna be super dominant, like this is gonna work really well, and then you see him in action, you go, oh, okay, he's just as bad as his torso looks. So.
That's where we should end this whole thing right there, is on that line, because I don't think we're going to say anything cooler than that or more apt.
Not going to top that. I love that the co-protagonist in these games, they either have a messed up torso or messed up legs, like a Street Fighter 5 Alex.
10 points.
So if you're a co-protagonist in this game, they're going to mess up something really, really bad about your appearance. So
well, if you combine those two things, you'd probably have a pretty decent-looking character, I'd imagine. So maybe that's the key, right? I don't know.
Or the funkiest looking character ever since Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. But anyway, that's going to wrap us.